Welcome back to the Crash Course podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. If you can believe it, we talked about it a little bit on last week's podcast. We're already talking about the 2020-2021 NBA season. It's already time to fire it back up again. It doesn't seem like that long ago that we talked about the end of the 2020 season and the bubble, but it's time to get started again. On to what, at least on the surface, will likely be a relatively normal season. I don't know. I mean, obviously, you're gonna see what you've been seeing in the NFL. Games are gonna get rescheduled. Games are gonna, there are gonna be, issues with coronavirus, but from the outside looking in, it's gonna look relatively normal. Everybody playing in their own arenas, that kind of thing. So we're here.
No fans. No
No,
fans.
no,
Most
no.
likely.
So is it no fans across the board, or is it kind of like the NFL where they can be like kind of liberal with their own?
I'm not sure because from what I understand, I don't think the Pacers are having any fans, but the Colts are allowed to
Yeah,
have some.
yeah. No,
So
I can see the NBA because I don't know either, but I can see the NBA being like, hey, we were really strict about the bubble, so at least in these first few months, let's have no fans. And then they may also then go the baseball route and be like, well, we do still want the playoff revenue. So
what I could see is them having, if they do allow fans, putting banners up for like the first 10 to 15 rows, because you definitely don't want fans sitting on top of the court like they do.
true.
That definitely would put the players that would put the players at jeopardy for sure.
Yeah, so we're going to preview the season for the Pacers. We're going to preview the season on the whole, tell you who we think is going to win the NBA Finals this year. But, B. Scott, you sent me a tweet the other day, and I was like, we can't not talk about this on the podcast. And that is...
Because we've talked about this before, and it was a ton of speculation from us, and
Right.
finally the answer came out.
Right, because we were genuinely curious, like, okay, so, because basically Paul George over the summer, just in case you missed it, Paul George over the summer basically came out and said, hey, you know what, the reason why I wanted to leave is because the Pacers don't want to win. I had, the best power forward in the game, ready to come and play in Indy, but the Pacers said no. And so we speculated, I think, we were all along the same lines of it's either Anthony Davis or Kevin Durant. I can't remember who speculated which one. But I know we were generally like, it's got to be one of those two. And I think we might, I was like, I can't remember who said Kevin Durant, but like that seemed like it could possibly be it because he visited the Pacers at one point. During his free agency, but nonetheless, it was basically all speculation. You and I both talked about, much like we'll talk about now, how like, he can be in, he can talk to whoever he wants, but that doesn't mean, the Pacers were willing to really, sell the future in order to get him. And so the tweet that you sent me, was that it was revealed that Paul George had Anthony Davis, was in talks to team up with Anthony Davis with the Indiana Pacers. And it's funny, I took a look at that tweet again before we booted up the podcast, and one of the replies cracked me up because it was like, now, does it mean talks as in he called Anthony Davis and Anthony Davis immediately hung up and blocked the number? Or or what exactly was it? Because, like we said before, it's... he could be in talks with whoever he wants. That doesn't mean Anthony Davis was destined to come here. And we've seen Paul George teamed up with Russell Westbrook. We've seen him teamed up with Kawhi. And he has as many titles as he would have if he was still on the Pacers. So it's not as if they were one move away from being...
In his defense, he would have been, if he would have stayed here and Anthony Davis would have come, they would have had a pretty formidable team up there,
right,
to take on Miami. I mean, if you look at it now, he's in the West. The West is stacked top to bottom, whereas the East, maybe it's top heavy.
Right, and I mean, and that's a fair point, but yeah, I mean, I just think that I don't know that you can't it's kind of like the whole deal when we talk about Paul George and people talk about him and Kawhi and how they could have been on the Pacers when that never was going to be a thing anyway. It's like it's not like the Pacers were guaranteed a title if they got Anthony Davis. Yes, they would have been more formidable for the Miami Heat, but at the same time, like there's no way of knowing that. You know, you still had to go up against LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. You know, and I'm just saying that we have it.
Was that
Like
even with Heat at
it,
that point?
it might have been the end
Because
of the Heat.
this was honestly this season that that he's talking about was post David West, post Roy Hibbert, all
Yeah,
of those. So like the Indy Star wrote up an article about how bad of an idea that. I mean, yeah, it sounds great, but how bad of an idea it really would have been for the Pacers. So it wasn't the Pacers saying no, we don't want to win. It was the Pacers saying no, we don't want to forfeit our entire future for maybe a year or
right,
two.
right.
And because at the time they didn't have much. I mean, we're talking like David Teague, Monta Ellis, Thad Young. I mean, it wasn't we're not saying he wanted to add Anthony Davis to the Eastern Conference Finals teams that we saw from them.
True.
This was basically right. I think this was the year before his injury. So it wasn't, or maybe it was the year after his injury. I forget which year his bad injury was with USA Basketball, but it wasn't with those teams that were taking the Heat to 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. Because yes, if you add Anthony Davis to those teams, that's the piece that probably puts you over the edge, to be honest.
Yeah.
But with the team that he was looking to add Anthony Davis to, I don't see that's not a title contender. That was barely a playoff contender.
Yeah, because if that was at the end of that run, then yeah, LeBron would have been back on the Cavs. So that was gonna be LeBron and Kevin
Kyrie
Love
and Kevin Love.
Yeah, which I mean
that won a championship.
Yeah,
but at that time there really wasn't any challengers per se for the Cavs. Let's be honest. I mean, Boston, they weren't. I mean, I think they were the closest thing to a challenger. The Bucks were nowhere near where they're at right now. Miami was obviously contending for top picks still. They were Dwayne Wade's Swans. They were actually pretty sure Dwayne Wade was with the Chicago Bulls at that time.
Yeah.
And so I don't think adding him, I mean, for what the pace, because just so everybody's aware, Anthony Davis was not a free agent when this was being talked about. And this was when Anthony Davis was looking to get out of New Orleans, essentially. And so the Pacers were going to have to trade. And they didn't have really good draft picks because they were picking in the low 20s, upper teens, just outside the lottery. And if you look at what the Lakers had to give up for Anthony Davis, the Pacers would not have had as strong of an offer for him. And I don't think it would have been feasible to pull off. And you would have, because they didn't have the players to pull it off for the trade, even if they did, they would have just gutted their depth. And they ultimately would have had to sell the farm draft pick wise. So there goes players like, Miles Turner was on the team. So Miles Turner was considered a possible piece in that, but he was young, very young. I mean, I don't know. So there goes, I guess, oh darn, there goes TJ Leaf. I mean, but it's just
it's the more
on paper it would have been awesome to see, but ultimately the Pacers would not be where they are right now. They would be looking more like, I don't know, who would I compare them to? Not quite the New York Knicks, because that's bad, but the Detroit Pistons or the Chicago Bulls right now would be kind of more along the line of where the Pacers would be. They wouldn't have been able to get Victor Oladipo. They wouldn't have been able to get Domas Sabonis.
Yeah.
So that's it. You probably wouldn't have gotten Aaron Holiday, because that would have been one of the draft picks you would have had to send along as well. So you're missing out on a lot of key contributors potentially that are on this team right now, and you're looking at a team that's struggling to get back into relevance because, yes, we are not a cash. We're not a big market. We do not attract big name free agents. We all know that. And if you don't have draft picks and you can't attract free agents, you've got nothing.
Yeah, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm like, I wonder if this is the actual situation, because remember, this is all coming out years later. It's not like it's been. I mean, I don't know if you can really expect for it to be like confirmed by Anthony Davis. I don't know like how likely that would be.
Why would Anthony Davis confirm it anyways?
Right, but what I mean is like there's no like other reports like corroborating it. What it sounds like is like Paul George is trying to be like like the more I think about it, the more I'm like I'm thinking that Paul George went to it was just very flimsy talks. He went to the Pacers, said this is what I've got in line, you better make it happen. And then when it didn't happen, that's when he leaked that the only place he wanted to go was LA, and royally screwed over the Pacers at the time. Like that's what I'm like the more I think about it, that's what the talks were. It was a bargaining chip to try to get what he wanted before, ultimately saying, "All right, you know what? You didn't give me what I wanted, then I'm going to hamstring any, possible trade you may have for me."
Well, I'll tell you, to be honest, here's my opinion on this is Paul George at this point just loves to hear himself talk.
True.
Like seriously, I don't think he really ever recently. I don't think he's thinking before he actually speaks, because you've heard what he said about the Clippers after after they fell apart in the playoffs. He just talks, and it's just like, would you just shut up and just play?
It's funny because
like,
I had
seriously, you put yourself on this echelon of the best in the game, but let's be honest, you really don't play like it. I don't honestly. I'm saying I'm glad Paul George is not with the Pacers anymore. And what's funny is that a lot of the offseason rumors surrounding like trades for Victor Oladipo or Miles Turner, there were several strong rumors and suggestions that the Clippers would trade Paul George back to Indiana for Victor Oladipo. And I'm like, I don't want Paul George. You can keep him. I mean, be honest, I liked him when he was in Indy.
Yeah.
I was sad to see him go. But now that I'm seeing him the way he is now, I'm like, man, I want a guy that's going to go out there and bust his butt and play.
Yeah.
And not sit on podcasts and run at the mouth all day.
Yeah, I definitely like I definitely like that was your thought, because the initial thought for me too, when I saw what you sent me, I was like, can he just shut up already? Like how, like I didn't want to be super harsh, but I was like, dude, like just
go play.
Like at this point
to be winning championships, yeah. I thought.
Like this is, this is what, 3 or 4 years ago now, because it was like 2017, so like at least 3 seasons ago. Like you're now 2 teams removed from the Indiana Pacers. And you also, again, like I know that the West is tough, but you also, I mean, yes, the West is tough, but he didn't do much with Russell Westbrook in Oklahoma City. And
I'll be honest, I don't think Russell Westbrook is a person you actually want to team up with anyways.
Yeah, and that may be true.
To be honest, and I'll get into a little bit more on that later, but
then I mean,
I'm not surprised he didn't succeed with Russell Westbrook. James Harden, in my opinion, is one of the top 4 best players in the NBA. And I honestly, I thought going in, like, man, this Rockets team is going to be good, but they weren't. They weren't really that good. And honestly, I think you're going to see the Rockets take a step up this year without Westbrook being there. Having John Wall is going to be a huge, huge increase for them. And honestly, I think the Wizards are going to be like, crap, why did we do this?
Yeah, I'm with you there. But I mean, still, even with you got Kawhi fresh off a championship with the Raptors, you would think that like with just Kawhi, without Paul George, what the Clippers had was easily as good, if not better, than what the Raptors had. So if you add Paul George to that equation,
what the difference is there, the Raptors had a bunch of guys that just wanted it.
True.
They didn't try to build a super team. They had Kawhi and then a bunch of, honestly, at the time, scrubs.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because this is like, because the move was
they basically won with a bunch of depth pieces,
right,
and Kawhi, and they took out. I mean, obviously, Golden State was pretty hammered with injuries, but near there, but it's still, they had guys that absolutely wanted it, that, they weren't getting paid.
Right.
The Clippers have Kawhi, who's getting paid. You got Paul George, who's getting paid in a place that he wants to be. And it's like, so these are the guys that aren't real. In my opinion, Paul George is a guy that if he never wins a ring, it's not going to matter to him because he's getting paid.
True.
To be honest. And that's why I would, if I had a 7-game series between the Pacers and the Clippers, I'd take the Pacers all day, every day because of that. And that showed even this past off season, or this past postseason, with the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat had a bunch of young guys on rookie contracts with Jimmy Butler, and they just wanted it more than anybody else in the East.
Very true.
Plain and simple. You could see that the way they played, they just wanted it more. And honestly, I don't think it helps when you got LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Don't get me wrong, because they both wanted it as well. Anthony Davis has never won a trophy, and you're putting on the Lakers jersey, so you know the history behind that and everything. And LeBron plays to win. LeBron gets paid, but LeBron also wants it. He does want it. I don't think Paul George really wants it. I think Paul George just wants to be considered a great player, one of the best players in the upper tier of the NBA. And then I don't know. It just, with what he wants to be, you just don't see it playing out on the court for him.
Which is weird because
I feel like he also spent a lot more time in street clothes than he did in a uniform.
Well, and the weird thing is that like winning a championship is like whether you think it's right or wrong, because I don't like the whole argument of your whole career is invalidated if you don't have a ring in the NBA. But like that's weird that you would think Paul George, based on that, if he wants to be considered great, like knows that he has to have that ring attached to his name. But yeah,
he just wants the paycheck that goes along with being considered great.
True. Well,
in my opinion, I hate to say that, but it's just the evidence points towards that right now.
Yeah, I agree. Well, enough talking about Paul George. Let's go ahead and start into our season preview. But first, let's get this word from Anchor. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device, and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our NBA season preview. First, we'll obviously start off with the Indiana Pacers. It's funny. We went into this offseason thinking that there was going to be all this, change, all this turmoil, for lack of a better term. Just like, we were predicting big sweeping changes across the board.
We weren't the only ones.
Right.
Everybody had a spotlight on the Indiana Pacers of saying, if you want to see a team that's going to make moves this offseason, look no farther than the Indiana Pacers.
Right.
And we just ran the whole thing back.
And
except TJ Leaf.
Exactly. So yeah, basically the Pacers drafted Cassius Stanley. We talked about that. I'm actually really excited about that pick. We'll see how he gets molded. We won't see a lot of him this year, but I'm just excited for what we'll see down the future. And then as far as notable departures, they didn't bring back Alize Johnson, and they traded TJ Leaf. Those are the two biggest things that you
I'm a little sad about Alize Johnson though.
Yeah.
He was a guy, he was never really going to see the court too much, so
Right.
It wasn't too surprising because at his position. But he's one of those guys that when he got out there, he played hard. I like that.
And so the projected starting lineup for the Indiana Pacers this year is going to be Malcolm Brogdon, Victor Oladipo, T.J. Warren, Domantas Sabonis, Miles Turner. That's what it's at least looking to be at this point. So, yeah, pretty much no changes, nothing that we didn't really already expect. And so kind of looking at what, some of the websites have projected, Forbes has the Pacers with 39 wins, finishing towards the back of the Eastern Conference playoff picture. I don't really know if I agree with that too much, just because, I was thinking about it yesterday. I was like, I'm excited for this Pacers season. I'm excited for the season from the Pacers standpoint, just to see, okay, we're running it back. First healthy season for Victor Oladipo. in a couple of years. You've got Sabonis playing well. You're gonna have him back. You're gonna have I don't how soon is Jeremy Lamb gonna be back? Is he already back?
I don't think he's back yet.
Okay,
No, I think you're probably going to see him after the first of the year, maybe. I
so
don't know because that was a pretty well. It was back in March. I don't know.
yeah, but I
You'll
mean,
probably see him before. You're probably going to see him at least before the trade deadline because he may be one of those pieces that they're going to try to. They may have to include into something
yeah.
if they make any
So,
moves at the deadline.
but I mean, it's I think the team that they're running back was a team that went 5-3 in the bubble, with the exception of no Sabonis. It's a team that
They're all
now,
star.
yeah, well,
They're all
yeah,
star.
right. So like they went 5-3 in the bubble without Sabonis and with a kind of 75% Oladipo. So I mean, now they have healthy Oladipo, healthy Sabonis. You've got the team back together really at full force for the first time, since maybe the beginning of last year. Like, because really Oladipo didn't come back till halfway through the season, so we don't even know what this team really looks like full song. So, and I don't really think I'm not super confident, because really no major moves were made this offseason. Like, I tried to include some notable ones here and there,
There was one.
all right.
Oh, for the Pacers? Are you talking about for the
Well,
Pacers?
just in general. I mean, yes, there was.
Well, I would think the swap of Westbrook and John
Yeah,
Wall.
but I'm saying
That's a pretty major one.
in comparison to and I know that last year was kind of an anomaly, but based on even a normal year, you see more people change hands, and that's all I
I
mean.
think
And
the
because
reason I think you saw that is because obviously this year's free agent crop wasn't anything to write home about.
well, and also I'm
But
sure it doesn't help things that the season ends and then you turn around and it's basically the next year already.
right, well, people are also wanting to be extra cautious about their cap space. One, because the cap's not going to increase too much this year because of budget deficits from COVID,
Yeah.
but also because the 2021 free agent crop is unbelievable. And a lot of teams are trying to gear up for that one where next off season is where you're going to see big moves being made.
Right. So looking at this season, I think the Pacers are still a very much a contender in the East. So I don't think that them being at the back of the Eastern Conference is going to be what happens at all. 72 games this season. It's a shortened season, obviously due to the to COVID and that kind of thing. So I have the Pacers at 41-31. I think they were around that last year with I think the same number of games. Like I don't think they're going to be remarkably better. But I don't
They might be. I think
they
they're going
may
to be
be
healthy.
right. But I don't think I was afraid to go up too much with the wins. But I think with the 72 game schedule, their win loss record will be very similar to what it was last year, if not a little bit better. I think the ceiling is a little higher, but I don't think the floor is as low as seventh or eighth in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this. I think this team is still going to. Honestly, based off of the way they played last year, the fact that everybody's back healthy, and now they have a coach that likes to move the ball offensively and doesn't, sludge it down in the mud and just play defense. Play not to lose, as Nate McMillan, his style was. I think you're going to see this team moving the ball a lot quicker. It's going to be from what I'm hearing for what it's like in practice and what we kind of saw in the first preseason game is this team is going to be a lot more up tempo. I think that's really going to feature Oladipo pretty well. I think you're going to see a better situation for having Miles Turner and Domas Sabonis on the court at the same time, because the type of offense that Nate McMillan was running was not really conducive to having those two players or really kind of figuring out the best way for Miles Turner to play the power forward position. Ultimately, I still do think TJ Warren is a better fit at the 4 than Miles Turner. And I think ultimately that may end up happening and you may see Turner coming off the bench, but hey, that wouldn't be a bad thing either. But I think this team has the possibility to finish third or fourth with as low as maybe sixth, to be honest. I mean, this is a team that even 2 years ago was top 4 or 5. They were, they always tend to land in that 4 or 5 category there. And based off of what Boston has done, because, Boston was the 4 this past year, or they were higher. But based off of what Boston has done, it hasn't been anything impressive, to be honest. I mean, they lost Gordon Hayward. I mean, yeah, they brought in Tristan Thompson, but and Kemba Walker injured himself in preseason camp. So they're going to be without Kemba for a while. I don't know how long, but it's going to be a significant amount of time. So that sets the Pacers up to really, if they come out of the gates firing and play up to their potential, this is a team that could be a top 4 team easily in the East.
Yeah, and like, so I just took a look back at Forbes, and Forbes has them at 39 wins, because weirdly enough, like, I was actually kind of surprised, because I mean, we're doing this preview maybe a week before we maybe would have, but because of the end of the college football season, we wanted to feature that next week. So really the NBA season starts in a couple of weeks, but I couldn't find a lot as far as like season previews go. But like Forbes has the Eastern Conference projections with the Pacers at 7th, right above the Hawks, at 39 wins. So, I was like, I don't think they're going to be that low. And some of the teams they have in front of them, I'll get into a little bit more in a minute. But I was like, I feel like those teams have a lot more question marks than the Pacers do. The Pacers are bringing back essentially the same roster.
Well, you got to realize the media is very, very hyped up right now about the Atlanta Hawks. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's like I don't know.
They are good.
Yeah,
they are good. They're getting better. They're just a very young team. But for some reason, the media has already anointed them as the next greatest team. And I mean, okay, I just don't see it quite yet. Philadelphia is just a dumpster fire no matter what.
Yeah,
I'm interested to see how they are with Doc Rivers at coach.
I think they take a step back this year, the Sixers, because
I do too. And then Washington, I don't know. I'm not the hugest fan of, for one, Russell Westbrook is not the same Russell Westbrook that he was 3 years ago even. I mean, he can't shoot the ball. His real only thing that he can do very well is drive it to the hoop. And he does that a lot because he's a ball hog. He is a ball hog. And he doesn't play defense at all. I mean, literally, he will, as we saw in the exhibition games in the bubble, Carson Edwards drove on him, and he just stepped out of the way and let Carson Edwards go right on by. He wanted none of that business. But, yeah, I'm not sold on Washington with Westbrook either. He's going to get there and find some reason to not be happy. The team that I'm the most interested in, that's intriguing to me, is, I mean, we know the Milwaukee Bucks, we know the Miami Heat are both going to be good. We know that. That's a given. The team that's intriguing to me is still the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah,
because Kevin Durant, his health, and then obviously always Kyrie's health, because Kyrie seems to play 2, sit out 5, play 3, sit out 7. I don't remember the last time he's played a full season without, with minus the rest nights.
Well, essentially, they're like the biggest X factor of this season based on what they did last offseason, bringing in,
right?
Because we weren't able to see, what they'd be like with Durant and Kyrie. So they're kind of the team.
I think they're going to be a dangerous team not because of Kyrie, but because of Durant.
Oh yeah.
Kevin Durant, in my opinion, he's what I was talking about earlier. As a player that he's a great player. He gets paid like a great player, and he plays like he wants it.
Yeah.
And he does it so quietly. Like, seriously, most of the time you forgot that he was with the Golden State Warriors. It's like, oh wait, yeah, that's right. Kevin Durant plays for the Golden State Warriors. Because he's quiet. He just goes out and does it.
Right.
And I like to watch him play because when he plays hard, and he's a team oriented guy, obviously. So that will be I think that's going to be a huge X factor for the Brooklyn Nets, and they're going to be a very tough team because of that. And Kevin Durant in the East finally.
Yeah, I mean, and so basically, long story short, question that I posed, what to you, B Scott, and to for the outline and stuff like that for the podcast is, are the Pacers still an upper echelon team in the East? I think that's a yes. I think like I said, none of the teams in front of them really made too many leaps this offseason, understandably so, and there's still question marks, like we said with the Sixers. How good will the Nets be? I hadn't heard about the Kemba thing, but now the Celtics are a question mark as well. And even, I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be good, but they're not, they are right now kind of the new Raptors as far as a team that's always good in the regular season and can't seem to get over that hump. So it'll be, I don't think the Pacers are going to, contend for, an Eastern Conference title or anything, but I do think they're still, an upper echelon team in the Eastern Conference.
Oh yeah, I agree. They're going to be a team that I think if it all comes together for them, they're going to be a team you don't want to face in the playoffs. I mean, you might, I don't know. They still haven't won in the first round in years. But I think this team is going to be much better than they were last year because they're healthy and the new coach.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am with you. So before we move on to the rest of the NBA, we would like to let you know that you can follow us at Crash Course FM on Twitter. Like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. You can listen every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. Also, don't forget about our YouTube channel, Crash Course Podcast. We are actually going to have a YouTube exclusive release here in the next few weeks. Is going to be our best of. Normally we put it on the audio version as well, but because of kind of the weird wonky year and us not taking our normal break that we do around this time, because we're going to basically be moving right from we'll have this podcast here, then we're going to have our college football one that'll be right in the NFL playoffs and the college football playoff and that kind of thing. So instead of putting the best of in like February, we're just going to make it a YouTube exclusive, so make sure you're subscribed over there. And if you're listening, or if you're watching on YouTube or listening to the audio version, go like our Twitch channel, which we're on right now, 3C Media. So make sure you go and basically go look at all of our socials. So go look at all of our socials, make sure you're locked and loaded so that you don't miss any content that we put out for the Crash Course Podcast. So looking at the rest of the...
Actually, real quick, just to wrap up the Pacers, real quick. The Pacers did just wrap up their second preseason game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. They lost it 116-106. Leading the way for the Indiana Pacers was Domantas Sabonis with 18 points and 9 rebounds, followed by great outings from Aaron Holiday with 16 points and 3 assists, and his brother Justin Holiday with 13 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. So it's nice to see the Holiday brothers really kind of picking things up, and nice to see a healthy Sabonis out there pushing towards that double-double that he typically has on the stat sheet.
So definitely good to see them get the win there. So
they lost.
Oh wait, the loss there. Yeah. So, but hey, it sounds like they played well though, nonetheless.
Yeah, and it's the preseason.
Yeah,
you just try to get the bugs figured out, especially with a new coach.
For sure. So looking at the rest of the NBA, kind of some of the moves that jumped out to me looking at what happened this offseason. You had Serge Ibaka to the Clippers. Anthony Davis re-signs with the Lakers. The Bucks did add Drew Holiday. Goran Dragic is heading back to the Heat, which I thought was pretty important. You also have the big move of the offseason, which is John Wall heading from the Wizards to the Rockets for Russell Westbrook, and Gordon Hayward, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, going from the Celtics to the Hornets. So that's kind of the big moves. Like I said, not a whole lot happened this offseason. So it'll be fun to kind of see everything kind of pick back up, because it's like, from an evaluation standpoint, like I can see a GM like being like, you know what, we're throwing the first half like pre-bubble of last year just out the window. We're now, I'm looking at what I'm looking at this team based on what they were in the bubble and then what they look at going into this season. Because I was like it seems like the first half of last season just doesn't even matter anymore. Like it just
Oh, no.
it doesn't.
That was so long ago.
That was like 5 years ago, basically. So looking at my season predictions of where I think teams will finish, I do have the Bucks at at number one, only because I'm like, there's really nothing else. If we're mainly running it back, I mean, the Bucks have been, arguably one of the best regular season teams the last few years. They run it back with Giannis. They add Drew. It's interesting because it did sound like they were in the market at 1.4 for James Harden. But a possible rumor there. So think about what this team would look like if they would have done that. But they are still they are still the best team in the Eastern Conference in my opinion. And you know what? Last year, I wanted to say the Heat were an Eastern Conference Finals team. I wanted to say it. I wasn't confident enough to pick them.
Well, they were the 6th seed.
Right, but that
would have been a real hot take.
Right, but I don't know. I don't know what it was. I was like they with the roster they had, I felt like they were better than a 6 seed.
Well, and for one, Jimmy Butler had never lived up to Jimmy Butler's hype.
Right.
Until last year. Or until the bubble, really.
Yeah, until the bubble in the finals, pretty much.
Yeah.
But so the Heat are my number 2 team in the Eastern Conference this year. I think that they're going to basically keep up their great efforts from last year. The third best team in the East for me is going to be the Brooklyn Nets. I think when Kyrie is on the court, he's going to be a big factor. And then, like you said, KD. I mean, basically, whenever you have one of the best players out there on the court in basketball, your team's going to be improved. They were a good team last year. Or a relatively good. I mean, they were a playoff team last year, 35-37, without Durant and Kyrie on the court. So you add, even if it's just Durant and Kyrie barely plays, you're still adding a lot of talent there, to the team. So I have the Nets as the 3 team for me. 4 for me is the Pacers, much like we talked about earlier, where they're just kind of running the same team back, and I think they have a lot of room for improvement and a lot of upside to what they can do this season. 5th for me is the Celtics, and that's kind of affirmed by the whole Kemba injury. Because I also think, like, while Gordon Hayward is not the Gordon Hayward of old, not having him is still going to be impactful. It's not going to be the biggest impact, but it's definitely going to be an impact that's felt. And now, especially without Kemba,
it's a depth issue. It's a depth piece for him,
right? So especially now without Hayward and Kemba, I think that's going to allow the Celtics teams to struggle. You have Brad Stevens, so he's going to be able to kind of coach his way out of it, much like we see with Greg Popovich.
You still have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
Right.
And Marcus Smart, so.
Right. And then the 6th, coming in at the 6th for me is going to be the Wizards. I do think that Russell Westbrook's going to make that team. I mean, they were a fringe playoff team last year, even with, now granted that was, a bad East, bad bottom of the East. They were woefully under 500, and we talked about whether or not they just pack it up and go home from the bubble last year. But I do think that Russell Westbrook is a good enough player to make this team, at least in the Eastern Conference, be, more solidly in the playoffs. The Hornets are at 7 for me, with the addition of Gordon Hayward. Again, another team that last year was fringe playoff. They were the 9th seed last year. Now, again, 23-42, so it's not like they were, on the cusp of really doing much of anything. But I do think the addition of Gordon Hayward helps. And then I have the Sixers, who, remember, were the 6th seed last year, back at the 8th seed. I do think they take a step back. They're kind of in a state of disarray right now, and I think, adding Doc Rivers helps, but I think this is going to be one of those things where it takes it maybe a year or two, especially in a weird kind of COVID season. I think it's going to take a year to maybe get everything in place to where this team needs to be. So I think the Sixers actually take a step back, and they're going to be the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I do like your pick of putting Washington in there. Mostly the biggest upside for the whole trade was the fact that Russell Westbrook will actually play, or John Wall just seems to always be injured.
Right.
Here as of late. So Um, it will be interesting to see, before I give my picks here, for some of these, there are moves that are going to, that they're destined to make, it seems like. For instance, the Rockets are really still looking hard, or potentially looking at trading James Harden. And one of the destinations, that's two of the destinations that are being considered, are Miami and Philadelphia. Um, if he goes to either one of those, that changes the standings significantly. Or if the Warriors make a move to replace Klay Thompson, that could bump them up some as well. So it's going to be interesting, since there wasn't really much of an offseason, to see how things play out there. But my prediction standings for the East, I'm going to go with the Bucks still at 1. I just feel like Miami was just clicking on all cylinders in the bubble, and it really ultimately that's what allowed the Heat to get over the Bucks. But I think the Bucks are still the best team in the East. I'm actually going to have the Brooklyn Nets at number 2 because of what I was saying earlier about Kevin Durant. I really have a lot of high hopes for them because of him, and we'll actually get to see them healthy all together for the first time. At 3, I have the Miami Heat. This is a much improved team even from last year because of the experience they gained in the playoffs and in the finals. They have confidence in themselves, and that's just as good as having some of the best talent. It's very similar to me to the Toronto Raptors type team. Except they have the talent is there more so than it was in Toronto even. 4, I'm going with the Pacers. Like I said, not because of anything the Pacers have done, but what some of the teams that were ahead of them haven't done or have done, or the changes that they made. At 5, I am going to put the Boston Celtics. I think they do figure it out because Kemba's not going to be out the entire season, I don't believe. And even if he is, I think they're in a good situation still with Marcus Smart. I think you're going to see some of these younger players like Romeo Langford and Carson Edwards get to see more playing time in the absence of Kemba. So that we'll get to see those types of things. And then I do think Tristan Thompson is going to make them better in the interior, but it's not going to be the same as like having Aaron Baines or if they would have traded for Miles Turner, who apparently they did not want whatsoever. So yeah, I'm going with them at 5. At 6, I'm going to go with the Philadelphia 76ers at 6. This is a team that doesn't really have an identity, but Doc Rivers is such a good coach, in my opinion, that he will round this team into shape enough that they'll do better than the 8th seed. At 7, I am going to I have the Washington Wizards at 7, mostly because pairing Westbrook and Bradley Beal together, you're actually going to get to see that duo actually play. Whereas the duo of John Wall and Bradley Beal, you never got to see play too much. So I think that helps them significantly. So I have them at 7. And then at 8, I'm actually going to put the Atlanta Hawks in at 8. They are a young team, but they have talent, and they were right on the cusp last year as well. I think the pandemic and the shutdown really hurt them more than anybody else. But I think, they've made some moves. They've been really solid in the draft, and I think it's going to pay off. And I think they're going to sneak into the back end of the Eastern Conference. I don't have too much faith still in the Hornets. I don't think the addition of Gordon Hayward for them is going to put them over the top. I do think they're going to be one of those teams that will be looking. It's going to be a back and forth between them and the Hawks, in my opinion, for the 8th spot. And then if everything falls, and then, like I said, if let's say James Harden does get traded to the Philadelphia 76ers then, in my opinion, catapult up into the top 4.
Yeah.
Because James Harden is that good of a player.
Oh yeah, 100%. So okay, so Hornets better or worse than 30 wins? Because Forbes has them at 25 as the 12th seed.
You know, I'm going to say worse than 30,
Mm.
but better than 25.
Oh yeah, like I think it's safe to say like bare minimum 28, 29.
I
But
just I don't have faith in in their in their front court.
right. Well, I mean, but this is a roster that finished ninth last year without Gordon Hayward. I mean, Gordon Hayward again is not an amazing player. He's not what he used to be, but it's still a solid piece.
But I feel like they brought Gordon Hayward in to essentially be like their star player, and that's not Gordon Hayward.
Right.
You know, I mean, this is still a team
And
that
he's often been injured
picking,
too.
and he has been often been injured. And what's funny is a lot of the really good players that are on their roster have been part of trade talks for even better players. So it's like, are they really all in with this team? Are they not? And I think that uncertainty of looking at how this team, like, any given day prior to the trade deadline, somebody could be shipped out. This is a team that a lot of these players are going to be looking over their shoulders or having to, their agents are going to be on their speed dial constantly. I think there's going to be too many distractions in that sense, of who's going to be the next move or what's the next move for this team, who's going to be on their way out. I don't think they're completely 100% all in on everybody. I mean, they're one of their best players. Miles Bridges is considered to be a top trade target or a top trade piece if they were to make moves for somebody else.
Right. Yeah, true. Fair enough. Also, how I was thinking too, looking at this Forbes sheet, like how weird is it to think about like the Pistons not even being in the conversation for the playoffs, and they haven't really done anything since Blake Griffin like got over there. That's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, did they? I thought, what did they make a move this offseason?
I honestly don't know.
Obviously, it wasn't that big of a move.
It didn't make too big of a splash.
I thought they did. I thought, you know what? Go ahead and start giving your West predictions, and I'm going to look into that.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and move it over to the West. So number one seed in the West for me is the Lakers. Pretty easy choice there, especially with Anthony Davis coming back. You obviously you still have LeBron. Now there were a couple supporting players that are not there anymore, but the two main pieces are still there. So the Lakers are still one for me. At two, I have the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets and Clippers are pretty interchangeable as 2 and 3. And I think I don't know. I'm more high on the Nuggets than I was last season. Nikola Jokic has been really good. They have a pretty good supporting cast. On that roster for the Denver Nuggets. So I do think it's going to be close between them and the Clippers. But I do think the Clippers take a tiny smidge of a step back, even with the addition of Serge Ibaka. But I do think the Clippers are third in the Western Conference for me. And like I said, it's pretty interchangeable. The top of the Western Conference is going to look very similar to what it did last year. I mean, and again, the Nuggets are a team that last year ended up, as one of the top teams in the postseason for the Western Conference. We're a very good team. They finished third last year. Just 3 wins off of the Clippers. Last season, 3.5 games back from the Clippers from last season. So I think the Nuggets take a little bit of a step up. The Clippers take a tiny smidge of a step back. So the Clippers are going to be at 3, and then so I was looking at Forbes and what they have.
Real quick. I found it. The Pistons were the laughing stock of the NBA during the offseason acquisition time because they signed they signed 2 centers and 2 forwards. So they added Jeremy Grant, Mason Plumlee, Jahlil Okafor, and Josh Jackson. And they also did acquire, if I read that right, Trevor Ariza. So this is a team that's loaded at the forward and centered position. So they're going to go big ball.
If this is going to be the best team ever from 2012, it's going to be awesome.
Oh yeah, I mean this is we're talking about like the Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace era when they just pounded it on you.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's wild. As far as Forbes goes, for the Western Conference, so this is who they have 4 through 8. They have the Jazz at 4, the Mavericks at 5, the Suns at 6, the Blazers at 7, the Rockets at 8. Now I guess that's not super far away from what I've got, but I do have them a little bit switched up, and I do have the Warriors in there as well. For me, fifth seed is going to be the Mavericks. I'm taking the Jazz completely out of the equation because
Really?
well, I mean, they're I mean, what are they bringing? I mean, they do still have some solid pieces, but they do lose Bogey. So
They
they're
still have Donovan Mitchell.
right. I don't know. I don't have them in the
In my
play.
opinion, he's one of the best players in the NBA.
I don't know. I've never been high on the Jazz. I have them out of the playoffs.
I guess
Um,
maybe I'm a little homerist on them with my boy Mike Conley.
True, and you know
Playing
what?
for him,
Yeah,
but
yeah. I mean,
still, they have Donovan Mitchell. They have Rudy Gobert. I mean,
yeah. Now, see, B Scott. Now you're making me second guess myself, and I don't like it. But
hey, I'm good at that.
yeah, yeah, it's very
But
true.
when I look at your West rankings, like I can't see who you should bump out of there
Right.
at
So
the same time.
yeah, the Mavericks are at 4 for me. I think they take a step up. They've got
Oh yeah,
you know,
I mean, isn't Porzingis? Isn't he healthy?
yeah. So
Or
yeah,
is he going to be healthy?
yeah. Porzingis is back. You know, you already have um Luka Doncic there, who's been amazing. I mean, the Mavericks. You know, you think about again, it's kind of like the it's kind of like the Nets. They had a good team even without some of their better pieces, and now they're primed with their better pieces to be back in the swing of things here. So they're at 4 for me. I have the Suns because, like I said, you know, evaluating this crop this year, you know, yes, I know you can't put a lot of faith on, hey, they went 8-0 in the bubble, but they were coming together last season. They add the veteran, they're a good young team. That you add the veteran presence of Chris Paul. I don't know that Chris Paul's
Which Chris Paul are they getting? Are they getting Chris Paul or the new Chris Paul?
right. But I think that I think that they're gonna be in pretty good shape. So they're the 5 seed. That's probably a little high, honestly, for the Suns. But you know what? I'm sticking with it. Then I've got the Warriors at 6, and
You
that's
heard it here first, folks. Because of that, the Suns are not making the playoffs.
right. Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Crash kiss of death. The Warriors are in at 6 for me, just because, like, yes, they don't have Clay, but I mean, they do come back with. Steph Curry's back, and I think that that's I mean, this team. Remember how unstoppable this team was with all of those players, and yes, I understand that like no KD, no Klay Thompson, but Steph Curry isn't nothing, and they still have one of the best coaches in the game in Steve Kerr. So
And they also added a very, 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 very talented young center in James Wiseman
yeah,
at the number 2 pick.
so I think that they're gonna bounce back this season. Are they gonna be amazing? I don't, they're not going to be the 2016, 2015 Warriors, but they're going to be good. The Blazers for me are the 7 seed, and then I've got the Rockets in at the 8 seed. I guess if you want, you can maybe take out the Blazers for the Jazz or the Rockets for the Jazz, but I almost would rather take out the Blazers than the Rockets. But it's so crazy because yeah, for Forbes they have the Warriors at 9, they have them out. And that's really the only 2 teams that we kind of have
And that's
there.
just because of Clay, which
Right.
is funny.
Right. So, I mean,
Don't they realize this team was winning championships before KD even got there?
right. So, yeah, I mean, basically just took the Jazz out, and then that was the rest of the rankings, put the Warriors in. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But, yeah, that's the rest of my Western Conference. Now I'm second guessing having the Jazz out, but maybe, if anything, move the Jazz out, move the Blazers out, put the Jazz in.
All right. So for me, Lakers are number 1. Let's just be honest. Plain and simple. In my opinion, they got better this offseason, if that's even possible. The Nuggets, I do have them at number 2. At number 3, I'm actually going to have the Dallas Mavericks there. I think Luka is going to have a huge, huge year. I mean, we're talking potential MVP caliber year. Yes, LeBron is the best in the league right now, but Luka is nipping at his heels. I think Luka has multiple MVPs in his future, to be honest. At 4, I am going to have the Clippers. Even though they may not always seem like they want it, they're just too good not to get some of those games. Let's see. So 4, I had the Clippers. 5, I'm gonna have the Golden State Warriors at 5. I think they're gonna exceed expectations, and ultimately, I think they end up making a move to replace Clay because they can't keep going on. He's been pretty injury prone. Not saying they're going to trade him because they can't, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them in talks, maybe even with the Indiana Pacers for Victor Oladipo. But I think even without Clay, they are a good enough team to be in the 5 seed. And if they make a move, definitely lock them in the top 5. Let's see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At 6, I'm going to put the Blazers in at 6. They just kind of seem to be like a team that's trending in the right direction to me. I mean, that's not too far off of where you had them. You had them at 7.
Mm-hmm.
So then at 7, I have the Utah Jazz in at 7.
See, the fact that you have them at 7 makes me feel better that I have them missing the playoffs.
Well, I mean, this is a team that I feel like could be a top 5. I don't think they're going to be a top 4, but definitely a top 5. They could be as high as a top 5. And honestly, I think I may have probably put the Warriors too high. I may have too much faith in them in the addition of James Wiseman. But really, if the Warriors just decide to, let's just play with what we got, I could see the Jazz at 5, the Warriors at 6, and the Blazers at 7. And then at 8, I'm going to have the Phoenix Suns. Yes, they were good in the bubble, but that was what? 8 games? 6 games?
8 games. They went 8-0. But I think it's one of those things where, like, can they keep up? I mean, obviously it's,
Because also if you look at a lot of the team, I think the toughest team they played was the Indiana Pacers. Because a lot of the teams they played they weren't playing their starters big minutes because some of these teams were already locked into the playoffs, and they just wanted to get through that 8-game stretch and just get to the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. And that's fair, but I also think too that
they are a better team. They are a playoff team in my opinion. Now they are a playoff team.
You add the veteran presence of Chris Paul, which, like I said, I'm not even saying that he's gonna be like a main contributor. I just think that he's gonna help out this team and help mold this young team. He's a good veteran presence to have.
I have faith in the team. I don't have faith in the front office. The front office, they may go on a losing skid like every team does, and the front office goes, hell with it, time to blow the thing up and start over. And they trade Devin Booker, and it's like, well, what'd you do that for? What did you get in return for it? And that's why I put them at 8. I think they could be as high. You had them at 6,
5, I think.
At 5, you had them at 5. So they can be that high. They really can, but a lot of it also depends on, is DeAndre Ayton ready to make that jump to that next gear? We all know Devin Booker can. Chris Paul is a good veteran leader, but beyond Devin Booker, who else is going to step up on this team and take it to that next level? Throughout an entire season, I mean, yes, it is still a shortened season, but Devin Booker's not going to be able to do it all every single night. Yes, he was able to do it for 8 games in the bubble, but can he do it every single night? No, there's no way he can do it every single night.
Right. Absolutely. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they're able to do. And yeah, it is one of the things that has turned me off kind of about the NBA, or one thing that does usually, kind of rub me the wrong way, is how quick teams are to just basically blow the whole thing up or get rid of coaches after like a bad 8-game skid. And it's like, you know what? Like, you could probably let that, you could let that simmer a little bit. It's not even a tenth of a season, and you're getting rid of people.
But it's these teams that are doing that, or these teams that are perpetually picking in the lottery.
Right.
They're the ones that go. I mean, you're never going to get anywhere if you just can continuously say, well, we lost 8 games, time to blow it up. What? That's why I'm not a huge fan of the NBA. Just to be honest with you. So I'm not. It's because of that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. So let's go ahead and get into our playoff predictions. Who we think is going to make the Eastern Conference Finals, Western Conference Finals, and the NBA Finals and beyond. So for me in the East, first round, it's going to be Bucks over the 76ers. Again, I think the 76ers take a step back this season. The Bucks are going to get past, going to have a pretty good show in the first round. Then you've got the Heat. I've got the Heat over the Hornets. Again, Hornets, I think are a playoff team because of Gordon Hayward, but the Heat show why, they made the finals last year. Then I've got the Nets over the Wizards and the Pacers over the Celtics. I think the Pacers, I want to have faith that this is the year they finally get some wins in the first round and actually win a playoff series. So I'm going with my heart on this one, but I think they do end up getting the win. Second round, Eastern Conference semis, I've got the Bucks over the Pacers. I don't think the Pacers really have enough to get past Giannis. And I think that's what's ultimately going to show in that playoff series. And then I have the Nets over the Heat. I think having Kevin Durant this season is going to be big as long as he's healthy. I think the Nets are going to be a pretty tough out. And then in the Eastern Conference Finals, I got to go with the team that has Kevin Durant over the team that, has just perpetually not been able to get over the hump. I have more faith in that single series, the Nets beating the Bucks, than I do, the Bucks beating the Nets, just because the Bucks haven't really shown me that they can, win when it really matters. They can win a series or two, but when it comes to actually getting over that hump and making it to the finals, they just haven't gotten there. So I am going to go with the Nets winning the East. So as far as go ahead, B. Scott.
All right. So for me in the East, the teams I have advancing from the first round are the Bucks, the Nets, the Heat, and the Pacers. Pacers get the monkey off their back; they get out of the first round. I don't see it. I don't see how that doesn't happen this year, to be honest. Unless the Rockets make that trade with the 76ers and send James Harden to Philadelphia, then things may change. Second round, I'm gonna have the Bucks, and I'm going to have the Nets as well advancing from that one. However, I am going to have the Bucks winning the Eastern Conference this year. I feel like Giannis has something to prove this year. He got embarrassed in the playoffs last year. He doesn't want it to happen again. I do love the addition of Jrue Holiday for them. I think that is a major signing for them. Yes, KD is going to be a key piece for the Nets, and it's going to be a very hard one to take out. But I don't have faith in Kyrie staying healthy for the full season or even a full playoff run. So I'm going to go with the Bucks to represent the East.
So as far as the West goes, the first round I've got the Lakers over the Rockets. I've got the Blazers over the Nuggets, and the reason why I went with this is because, again, the Nuggets kind of remind me of the Bucks as far as they're just not the same in the postseason. They have good regular seasons and just haven't been able to make that next step. And also, playoff Damian Lillard is a lot different from regular season Damian Lillard. Both are good, but I feel like once Damian Lillard gets into the postseason, I feel like, even last year, I mean, in an overmatched series against the Lakers, he still managed to get that team hype enough to get that game 1 win. Had him in some of the other games as well. Then I've got the Warriors over the Clippers. I think that they win a playoff series, and then I do have. I know I originally had the Suns over the Mavericks. I realize now that's probably a little bit overeager of me, so I'm going to go ahead and have the Mavericks beating the Suns. I was for some reason I was like,
Suns train.
I was so excited, and then I was like, now that I think about it a little bit more,
You looked at what they did in the bubble and said NBA champs.
Exactly. Well, and so what makes me change that pick too is I honestly forgot
about the Jazz?
No. But I did also forget that Porzingis, because Porzingis has been out so long, like I forgot that he was even an option for the Mavericks. So I think he puts them up over the edge. Second round, Western Conference semifinals. I've got the Lakers over the Mavericks, and I've got the Blazers over the Warriors. In that matchup, it's basically Lillard versus Curry. I think the Blazers are going to rise to the occasion a little bit more. I think the second round is where the Warriors are going to miss Clay. And having that, I mean, like I said, it's not going to be, Steph Curry is Steph Curry, but I think ultimately the Blazers get that win there. Those are two, I think, as the way the rosters are now, I think those are two evenly matched teams there. And then in the Western Conference Finals, I do have the Lakers beating the Blazers, so it'll be Lakers and Nets for the NBA Finals.
All right, so for me, the teams that I have moving on from the first round, I have the Lakers. Let's see. The Lakers, the Jazz, the Mavericks, and the Blazers. So yes, Lakers, Jazz, Mavericks, Blazers in the first round. Second round, I have I have to keep looking back here. I have the Lakers and the Mavericks moving on in the second round, and I have the Lakers beating the Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals.
So NBA Finals for me, who I think is going to win this year, win the whole thing. For me, it's going to be the Lakers. I know that's not a controversial pick or anything else, but I again, not enough has changed now. Like you said, you brought it up a few times as far as like, yeah, if James Harden ends up with another team, and kind of creates another super team, or maybe if
James Harden ends up with Miami,
then that's gonna be that's gonna change some things. But just as it stands right now, not enough really changed from this year to last year to really make me think like, yes, that's gonna be the team that beats the Lakers. And so I do think the Lakers end up going back to back and winning the NBA title.
Yeah, I have the Lakers over the Bucks. It's going to be a close one because I think if there's a player and there's a team that can take the Lakers down, it is the Bucks. I have the most faith in them. The Nets possibly could too. It all depends on health for the Nets, to be honest. But until proven otherwise, for me, the Lakers are still the best team in the NBA. And they only got better, in my opinion. The signings that the people they brought in are better than they were last year. So,
yeah,
Lakers until otherwise proven, it's got to be the Lakers.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and what the kind of thing that kind of just is a little rough about it is just the fact that it's like I feel like going into last year there was all this different possibilities of what could happen. You had Paul George is on the Clippers now, Kawhi's on the Clippers now. Russell Westbrook is on the Rockets, and so I think this year it's kind of just like everything's kind of running back, and we're back to seeing. Well, there's really one team that's awesome, and we'll see if it's that team unless something else happens. It was like that for so long with the Warriors, and now it's like that with the Lakers.
Well, it was like that way so long with the Miami Heat as well, except at least with the Miami Heat, we had somebody else like the San Antonio Spurs sitting out there that could take them down. I don't really see another team out there that fully matches up with the Lakers.
Right.
The Spurs were the Spurs then, Tim Duncan and all of them. But now it's tough. It's tough.
It is. And it's gonna be a fun season. Excited for the NBA season to get underway. Excited for the Pacers season to get underway. But that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can always find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87. That's where I'm at. I'm on Twitter all day, every day.
Yeah,
catch me there.
And you're stepping up your Twitter game, so that's what we like to see.
Trying.
Remember, we say
that every week.
I know. I want to say that every single week. It's going to be what we kind of sign off on.
If you really want to find me, you can find me at NCAA Wrestling.
There you go. So
Let's
send
be real.
any.
That's the one I'm on all day, every day.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So if you want a Twitter handle to go harass, that's the one to go do.
Don't harass.
You can follow the podcast.
That's not me. It's not me.
Well, you just said
That's
it was
the one
you.
I monitor. I monitor.
Oh, so it's you. You can follow the podcast at Crash Course FM. Remember, you can also like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. You can go to our YouTube channel, subscribe. Like I said, there will be a YouTube exclusive on there here within the next probably week or so with our best of podcast from 2020. That'll be exclusively on YouTube just because, like I said, it's the end of the year with all the delays and stuff of the season. We took a lot of our weeks off we normally would take like earlier in the year when there was nothing to talk about. Now
we have no choice.
Right? No,
the NBA season kicking off. Everything is happening all at once right now.
Right? Exactly.
This is typically a little bit of a slower time of year because we're in the middle of the NBA, or starting to be already in the NBA season. College football is wrapping up. NFL is wrapping up.
Yeah, this would be our college football playoff preview, and then we'd be back in January with the NFL playoff preview, and that would be, this would have been normally our last.
Yeah, this would have been this past weekend would have been the conference championship.
Yeah, so this podcast would have been the last one of the year, and then we would have been on our 2-week hiatus, and then being back with the playoffs and stuff. So yeah, it's a different animal this year because of everything being delayed and all that kind of stuff. But remember, you can also listen every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. And then also, remember, you can also go follow us on Twitch, 3C Media. We'd love to hear, feedback live from you guys, so go check out the Twitch channel, go give it a follow. We'd love to hear you guys live, reacting to different kind of things, so don't be shy. Go follow the podcasts, and we'd be we really want to interact with you guys. So that will do it for this week's edition of the podcast. Remember, next week we are going to be talking about the college football playoff and that kind of thing, because we will kind of know how everything's going to play out there. But until then, have a good week, everybody.